Hello everyone, and welcome to Should You Bother for the first time. Today we're going to be discussing Top Gun Maverick. Released in 2022, it's a very special movie for multiple reasons. Personally, it's special to me because I watched the original Top Gun probably 40 or 50 times with my dad when I was younger. It was on repeat in our basement constantly. Secondly, it's been 36 years since the first Top Gun came out, and I don't think anyone expected a sequel at this point. And lastly, this movie was stuck in COVID limbo for 2 or 3 years at this point. I remember seeing ads and movie trailers for this way back in the early 2020, and it's been 2.5 years since then, and we're finally getting it. This review will be entirely spoiler free, but the second Top Gun takes place about 30 years after the first one. While I don't think the first Top Gun is necessarily needed to watch this movie, you can definitely get a lot of enjoyment out of it. It definitely adds to it. Some of the relationships, some of the inside jokes just won't mean as much. There's enough flashbacks and enough kind of building that it will make sense, but I definitely recommend seeing the first one before you go see this one. It follows the same character of Pete Maverick Mitchell. He is stuck in the corner of the Navy. He's kind of just testing planes and just avoiding advancing in the ranks because he clearly wants to stay in the cockpit. He doesn't want to end up at a desk. And he gets himself in trouble repeatedly doing this. And just in time, he's all of a sudden called back to Top Gun to teach some of the best pilots in the world a mission where he's the only one in the world that has experience because there's not a lot of air-to-air fighting anymore in the world. This movie honestly surprised me. I wasn't expecting anything amazing out of it because it's a sequel that didn't really feel necessary, but man, I'm really glad they did it. It was way better than expected. I'm going to go into some of the things that I think really stood out. Is one, just like the first one, the soundtrack is fantastic. They bring back a lot of the original 80s music and they bring a lot of modern stuff with it. Another thing this movie does very well is it has its own identity. It is a Top Gun movie. It is based off some of the same characters, but it doesn't feel the same. It has the core feeling of Top Gun, but it's very unique. It has its own story, its own new characters, and it definitely has its own legs to stand on. It's not just a sequel. It's not just another Top Gun. It's the story of these new characters and how Maverick kind of fits into their story. Lastly, this movie also does a really good thing where a lot of movies artificially raise stakes. Like some bad guy has some ability that can't be defeated, or something's like impossible, or it's just there's always something that's like, oh, this is why this is bigger and badder. Top Gun Maverick doesn't really give you a solid bad guy or a solid like challenge. It mainly is a movie. It's like, how hard can you push it? It's about like the guts the pilots have. They don't just throw something like, ooh, this is an unbeatable enemy and they somehow beat it. There's actual stakes that make sense and don't feel fake, which I really appreciate this movie. Another thing that really surprised me with this is the newer actors. A lot of them are just, the acting is great in this movie. I feel like obviously Tom Cruise gets really dedicated to his movies, but I feel like all of the cast bought in just as hard as he did. There's not a character that stands out as just like, all right, they're just like, they don't feel like they belong. They all feel like aviators. When you walk out of the movie, you feel like, oh, I want to go be a pilot. Much like the first movie I saw when I was a kid, I wanted to go be a pilot because I thought Maverick and Goose were so cool. It does a really good job of making them feel really, really cool. And the last thing I really want to mention is the action in this movie. The action in this movie is some of the best like action scenes I've ever seen. It's most likely because Tom Cruise kind of insisted on everything being real. They were in the planes, they were in the cockpit for all of these scenes, and it really, really comes through that all of this was actually done. It doesn't feel like CGI. It isn't CGI. None of it is. As an action movie, this is one of the best action movies I've ever seen. Just the action alone is worth seeing this. Even if you're not there for Top Gun, you don't like Tom Cruise, the action alone is good enough to go to this movie. It's honestly, I can't think of any action that really beats it. There's stuff I'm sure that's close, but it's this is on a whole new level. So getting to the score and answering the question, should you bother? We're gonna go into that. So how I'm gonna answer this is the question, should you bother? Yes, I think you should. The action in this movie is fantastic. The acting is great, and the story is good. The relationships in this movie are special. If you watch the first one, there's moments where I teared up. There was one moment specifically where, if you're a big Top Gun fan, this hits you right in your emotions. So yes, I would definitely try to see it in theaters as well. The action and the way the planes, just the sounds, all of it, I feel like it really benefits from being in a theater. It'd be just as good at home, but I feel like it just adds a little bit being into the theaters. And finally, the last part of this show, Should You Bother, is I'm going to give every movie a letter grade. So how I determine its letter grade is basically the things that are important to me. One, obviously the plot's important, the acting's important, the feel of the movie. Is it entertaining? Is there any point where I'm looking at the clock or realizing I'm in a movie? A great movie to me is something where you're just locked in the entire time and it feels short. Even if the runtime's long and it feels short, I think a movie succeeded then. In Top Gun Maverick, unexpected to me, I think is better than the first movie and gets an A. An A is not an easy grade, it's the second highest. If there's something really special, I'll give it an S, but giving this an A, it's a movie I would say is a must-see, especially if you like the first one. I think this does everything the first one does, but does it better. Thank you all for watching the first review on my channel and the first episode of Should You Bother. Any thoughts, comments, any disagreement, let me know in the comments, and let me know what you thought of Top Gun Maverick. Thank you all and have a good day.